Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Fabienne Hara. I'm the Secretary General of the Paris Peace Forum, and I'll be moderating this panel. I want to welcome you to this discussion, which will focus on the one-year anniversary of the Net Zero Space Initiative, an initiative that was launched at the Paris Peace Forum in 2021, exactly 1 year ago. And which will focus on the space debris and how to manage space debris and the increasing risk that they represent to a number of actors. As you may know, the Net Zero Space Initiative was launched with 11 members. Now we have 53, which means that it's been a great success from 24 different countries. At the PPF, at the Paris Peace Forum, a year ago, we felt the need to deal with this issue of space debris. It was not enough on the agenda, on the international agenda, and we also felt the need to link it to the issue of sustainability. So put it on the agenda, space agenda, but also link it to the agenda of sustainability. So this is one of the reasons why we decided to launch this initiative. And of course, space, as you know, space sustainability is not just for space users, space operators, space agencies, it's for all of us. We are all space users. It's useful for telecommunication, for GPS tracking, for financial transactions, for cloud capacities, and so on and so forth. So we are all space users, and that's really the starting point. And just a closing word on the Paris Peace Forum. We are an organization that focuses on global governance needs, and particularly on the governance of global commons, and outer space is one of them. We focus on filling the gaps, if I may say so, of the international system when it's unable to produce good enough political governance on issues of common interest, like outer space. Joining me for this discussion, we have a stellar panel. I'm going to introduce them one by one as I'm turning to them for their intervention. So first of all, the good news, and let's start focusing on the good news. The good news is that Net Zero Space has new supporters. So let me turn to Julie Zoller first. Who is with the Project Kuiper from Amazon to tell us more about the good news.
Thank you very much. It's delightful to be here at the Paris Peace Forum for the first time and to be able to join the Net Zero Space Initiative. Project Kuiper is Amazon's broadband satellite network consisting of just over 3,200 satellites in low Earth orbit, combined with customer terminals, gateways, and an extensive ground infrastructure. Our mission is to provide fast, affordable broadband to unserved and underserved communities around the world. We support the Net Zero Space Initiative of safe space operations and long-term sustainability of space. It's the foundation for a robust and sustainable space industry, and in fact, space safety has been a tenet at Amazon Kuiper since day one of the program. We chose our orbital altitudes, 590, 610, and 630 kilometers, to ensure a great service to customers, but also to ensure that we could deorbit in less than 1 year at the end of mission life. We designed our satellites to have maneuver capability from the moment of deployment through mission, through deorbiting. And we're protecting sensitive components like batteries and the propulsion tank. We have independent solar arrays. We have redundancy on critical components like flight computers, radios, and sensors, so that should our satellites be impacted by small debris that can't be tracked today, we're able to survive that. We're testing on the ground now, And in the next quarter, we'll be launching 2 prototypes so that we can demonstrate in space that our satellites are meeting our strong design expectations before we begin to launch production satellites. We're committed to the net zero goal of safe space operation and the long-term sustainability of space, which is essential for satellites to provide the important services that you just described, including broadband internet, with their significant economic and societal benefits. Project Kuiper is a great example of how Amazon is using its scale to solve big problems like the digital divide. We have a lot of work ahead, but we're really optimistic about the difference Kuiper can make for the future and communities around the world. And it's a pleasure to be here with you to talk about Project Kuiper and our commitment to safe space. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Fantastic news. Thank you for your support. I'm turning to Sabrina Alam from SES, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and also for the Net Zero Space Initiative. SES, and I'll take you back a while ago, we embarked on a journey to ensure that sustainability was crucial to our business, to all of our decisions and our objectives. And so within that, we created something called our ESG, Environmental Social Governance Strategy. And we wanted this to make sure that this is how we do business from now on, that these are the decisions we need to take. And within that, we had 4 key pillars. So first one being space sustainability, the second one being climate action, the third being critical human needs, and the fourth being diversity and inclusion. So touching on all the points that the Paris Peace Forum really tried to display. And so within space sustainability, it was only obvious for us to join the Net Zero Space Initiative. And so some of the things that we've pledged to and then we've committed to are ensuring that we develop partnerships, we explore other options. And for those of you who aren't familiar with SES, we're a satellite operator who plays in MEO and GEO. And what that means is that we don't operate within the low Earth orbit environment currently. And so the way in which we have to think about space sustainability is really focused on new innovations, STM, SSA, and so on. And one of the things we really believe in is advocating for a safe use of space. And so we want to work with partners, we want to develop relationships, we want to advocate. We also want to take it one step further, where we look at something called life cycle assessment. So we understand the impact of our products and services all the way from the beginning of life, from manufacturing, all the way to the end of life. And by understanding the impact across environmental and social factors, we can then make informed decisions about how we can move forward. And so we're really happy to join the Net Zero Space Initiative, and we thank you again for setting it up and for bringing such great actors into it. And we're really proud to sit with you and really happy to form those partnerships and develop further.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Mr. Matthias Campos Abad from Astralinto Space Technologies, please.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an absolute honor to be here on stage in the Paris Peace Forum to express our support and pledge our commitment to the Net Zero Space Initiative. Astralinto was born in 2020 in Ecuador with the look to become the go-to space service provider in Latin America. And I was just told backstage that we're the first Latin American company to make the Net Zero Space Initiative, and I hope we're not the first and only. So going back, I will continue to promote so that more Latin American people join this initiative. So Astralinto was born was ambitioned to be the company that inspires people to reach what seems impossible. And we hope that through space, we allow people to imagine a better future. And one of our pillars when we were conceived was always space sustainability and sustainability in general. And one of my supporters and also business partner, she always tell me, don't focus on sustainability yet. It's best to think about the business first, have our business solidify, and then we do sustainability. And I was always say, no, we have to have sustainability in mind since the first day, because otherwise changing momentum, it's harder than just having it since the first day. And with that, one of our first few hired or people joining the team were actually 3 environmental engineers. And with their support, we've done amazing work in promoting what space. And interestingly enough, I usually attend space events, so I really want to more space, let's say. And here to the Paris Peace Forum to thank you for being a bridge so that we space people can talk to other industries. So we spread the message of awareness that this brings. So with my team of environmental engineers that I just want to mention them quick to thank them, Eliana Cadena, Javier Valdivieso, and Camila Flores, we presented a paper at the IAC this year where the research outcome was a value that would allow all the space actors to quantify the carbon emissions they have for a CubeSat launch. So let's say you have a 6U, you find our paper, you multiply by 6, and you have your carbon emissions. And this is interesting because I've seen that there's a disconnect between what people think the space sustainability versus what's sustainability on Earth. And we were talking with the other speakers backstage that there shouldn't be a disconnect, okay? Because sustainability on space is for sustainability on Earth. So when I always would think sustainability on Earth is avoiding carbon emissions, and sustainability in space is to have clean orbits, but then you have to be clean on how to get to space, and you have to be clean on how you clean orbit. So I invite everybody, and I hope this discussion also has some of those inputs on how we can connect this. And then again, I'm very happy to pledge our support and be a very active member of this Net Zero Space initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the community, I would say. Yesterday, President Fernandez of Argentina and President Petro of Colombia were at the Paris Peace Forum. We gave a special focus, special priority to Latin America this year. So hopefully there will be more connections in the future. So now let me turn to organizations that are already supporters of the Net Zero Space Initiative to give us an update, please. So John Janka, could you please take the floor now?
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to thank Jerome, Maria, and everyone else at the Paris Peace Forum who's worked tirelessly over the course of the past year on this Net Zero Space Initiative. I believe that these activities regarding the shared use of the Earth's limited orbits are as important to facilitating geopolitical stability as the rest of the work of the Paris Peace Forum. And in particular, we need to be mindful that the existence of have-nots in the developing space economy could be a destabilizing force that we need to seek to avoid. Viasat joined this initiative a year ago with a view towards developing comprehensive quantitative models that forecast the evolution of LEO so that regulators can set prudent limits on collision risk and ensure that there is responsible spacecraft and constellation design and operation. We believe that that would allow us to set clear guardrails and lanes in space so everyone can participate in space in the future, regardless of whether they are ready to participate today. The good news, in addition to having new members, is that we're now very focused on solutions to the crisis. Our work over the past year has really occurred in 2 different work streams that are connected. Working Group 1 involved cataloging existing regulations around the world and discussing ways to enhance and harmonize regulation globally. Regulation is important because, as economists recognize, the short-term interests of some actors in space may not coincide with long-term interests in the common good. So again, we need some guardrails in place and we need some lanes on the road to make sure everyone can reliably and safely use the shared highway that is space. The second work stream occurred in Working Group 2. Working Group 2 involves seeking a way to assess collision risk in LEO on a global basis, developing clearer protocols when maneuvering is needed to avoid collisions, and better understanding the carrying capacity of the Earth's orbits. And by that, I mean, how do we maximize the opportunities to operate within some very real limits that exist to the use of LEO, limits that are created by the growing amount of debris and by the increasing collision risk created by numerous larger and larger satellites in LEO. Going forward over the course of the next year, the key from my perspective is knitting these two activities together. I don't believe that we can reduce collision risk or learn how to operate on a shared basis within carrying capacity limits with voluntary protocols alone. We need some regulatory metrics to which operators are held, like a reasonable aggregate collision metric that takes into account the evolving environment in which they will operate. And we need to apportion that risk level among operators so the carrying capacity can be maximized and shared effectively. Otherwise, choices one operator makes may deny others access to space on similar terms. And I believe that market access conditions, as the working group reports indicate, are critical in terms of making this happen. We will continue our work in the coming year, and while we do, I suggest we be mindful of two things. The observation of the European Commission that we stand at a crossroads with respect to the future of space. And if you'll bear with me for a moment while I read a quotation. If we do not find ways to manage space traffic, our past and present space activities will jeopardize the safety, security, and sustainability of outer space, and as a result, our future ability to rely on space as an enabler of key services in benefit of humankind. The other principle I'd like you to keep in mind is the observation of the Conseil d'État in France, who recognized that national market access decisions are one of the rare decisions, if not the only one, which condition the provision of satellite services in a given territory. In conclusion, unless and until we have new laws and regulations, national market access decisions will set the stage for the future of space. And that includes containing the level of collision risk that is allowed to occur and its consequential impact on the shared use of space.
Thank you. Thank you so much for Viasat's support. Anirudh Sharma from Gigantara, please.
Thank you very much for having me here, and it's been an honor to work with Paris Peace Forum and the Net Zero Initiative for the contributing towards building this second white paper. So we became part of this few months ago, where one of the aim of our company was to work towards space sustainability from day one. We started this company in 2018. Initially, we were just a satellite manufacturer. Basically, we were manufacturing a number of components for satellites, and then we realized that space debris and space sustainability will be a huge problem. We were working on a patented technology, which is to track objects in space, which are called lethal but non-trackable, basically objects between 1 and 10 centimeters, with a LiDAR-based technology. So with this technology, we started working towards addressing the problem of space debris. And then we realized it's not just launching of satellites to space to track space objects, but also working towards building a data fusion engine or a model where we can collect data from several sensors is very crucial for us to be able to bring a better picture to space traffic management. And the second aspect to this is, before we enter into space traffic management, there are some numbers that I would like to tell. We launched the first satellite in 1957 from Sputnik. Till now, we have over 6,100 launches, in which there were around 12,000 satellites being launched. 7,500 objects are there in space, in which 5,000 are active. 5,000 are active satellites, and we have more than 1 million objects, nothing but junk. So we don't know what these objects are because, we don't know the exact position of these objects because all the numbers that we have today are based on mathematical models or simulations. It is very crucial for us to be able to address the gap that exists today in the data in terms of understanding what is happening in space before we get into the topic of space traffic management. Space debris remediation is one of the important things, and we're doing a bit with a national support with the government agencies working towards having capabilities for space debris or space object tracking, but there requires a better data and consistency in terms of data sets that we generate. Hence, our contribution has been towards working on building a better catalog, which we do not have today, to be able to address this problem better.
Thank you so much. 1 million objects in space that we don't know what they are. I mean,
so basically, we have over 1 million objects greater than 1 centimeter, in which the objects between 1 and 10 centimeter are called lethal but non-trackable, which means we don't know the positions of it. All we know is flux and mathematical models based on which we are able to predict that there are million objects. We track around 35,000 objects every single day, which is greater than 10 centimeter.
wow, that's a very impressive number. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists for initial presentations and updates. And as you can see, we have a lot of support to the Net Zero Space Initiative and the commitments to the principles of Net Zero Space, especially regulation and better governance. One question that I have for all of you is about awareness of the greater public. I mean, how do you think we should work together to create more awareness of these issues, of the dangers, the risks represented by space debris? Who wants to answer first? John.
I'll go. I think the good news is we have awareness now. I think back to when we started working on this about 2.5 years ago, right before the pandemic. And you would talk to people and their eyes would glaze over. They had no idea what you were talking about. They didn't know what LEO was. They didn't know what debris was. And we're now seeing all of these issues constantly being addressed in mainstream press. And I think if you do surveys of the public, you find out that the public is now concerned and the public wants action by governments on these issues. I think we're now headed to the solutions point. We have awareness, and now, including with the work of this group, we need to hone and come up with some very clear and concrete solutions that can be implemented in the near term. But that work rests with us, not the public.
Thank you. So I just want to bring a bit of a different perspective. So within the ESG space, we have to work with a lot of different industries. And just the other day, was at a conference, and one of the things they said is, but space is the worst industry ever for sustainability. You can't do anything about that. And actually, I think one thing we need to recognize is sustainability, as you said, comes in many different forms for the industry. So that's the first thing we need to recognize. Secondly, one of the things I said to them is, unfortunately, what we've done on Earth, we've kind of done in space. You know, we've gone, we've tackled it, we've conquered it, without actually thinking what are the issues that will surround it. How do we make further use of it? The public doesn't have a great understanding of that, and the public are quite confused about actually what can they do, what does it mean for them. So trying to bridge that gap, I think, is really vital for us as space actors to do. I think there is definitely an education piece, both from a younger generation side all the way to, you know, senior leaders and so on across different industries. Because we also have this notion that space sits alone. It doesn't. When we look at our value chain, we cross so many other industries. We have to ensure that we are responsibly working with other industries, with schools, with universities. We're teaching them what sustainability actually means and what the space industry can actually do. When I go to schools, I say, take out your phone. Of course, everyone has a phone whilst they're at school now. Wasn't like that a few years ago. And I say, well, the space industry has enabled you to use that. And they're like, what? Oh my gosh. So there is a lack of understanding of what space can do, what sustainability means, what debris means, but there's this level in which we need to go and talk to them about. And we need to be able to adapt the way we talk to those different groups, to those different stakeholders, in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that they can understand, and it directly affects their lives. And as you said, let's put a positive spin on it. We're looking at solutions. It's not the end game, you know, we're getting there, but they can be part of those solutions. And they need to be, and they need to have their voice heard. So that's something I just wanted to add there. So thanks.
I wholeheartedly agree with your comments. It's really important to take the temperature down a bit on this subject. I find oftentimes it's approached with quite a bit of an alarm. As a constellation of low Earth orbiting satellites, I can tell you that no one is more invested in having a safe space environment than we are. It will be impossible for us to do our work if space is not safe. And so we're highly motivated to take the kinds of steps that I talked about earlier. Yeah. I think also that industries are springing up around this need. You know, we heard about the need for tracking smaller objects. You know, historically we could only track things that were 10 centimeters and larger. And there are smaller objects than 10 centimeters that can cause catastrophic damage to satellites. And companies are now on the cusp of being able to track those lethal, non-trackable debris objects. And what that will enable satellite operators to do is avoid that collision. Instead of being surprised by that lethal, non-trackable object, we can avoid it. So we're doing a lot to understand the environment better. Any technology in today's age is rapidly evolving. I mean, just look at our cell phones and think about what kind of capabilities we have today versus what we had 10 years ago, you know, pre-smartphone. Space is going to be just like that. So we're not stuck in the present moment. We're always getting better.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to echo what
Go ahead.
Sabrina and Julie were saying, I just want to give an example. Is like, let's say we're on a trip and then for some reason the GPS stops working. What would you do? You're scared, you're afraid, right? So you can maybe at a personal level, like think how that would feel, and now think about all the trade routes, think about all the commerce, how and the economy gets impacted by not having GPS active. So that's the impact of space. So we don't only need to educate people or spread awareness on what is to have a sustainable orbit, but also what are the benefits of space. So that, for example, in Latin America, we're working tirelessly to do. And of course, through a private industry, it's hard, but we also have a foundation. So through the Sideralis Foundation, we work with children, we work with the government, so that they understand the benefits of space. Once the general public understands the benefits and how space helps their everyday and helps them mitigate the impacts of a lot of things on Earth and be sustainable, that's when the communication about what a sustainable orbit is and why is it important becomes easier. So it's always a matter of connecting what you're taught in school about not emitting greenhouse gases because the Earth needs to be kept for our future generations. Tie that conversation towards we need orbit to be clean so that that's left there for future generations as well. And that's the sustainability that we have to have as a planet.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We heard about the need for public education. We heard about the sizable threats and risks that collisions could cause due to space debris. So my next question to you all is, how do you see the collaboration between private and public sector on this? because of course, having a phone is almost like it has become a human right almost for the entire population on this planet, but it's still linked to the private sector. So how do you see this relationship work between the public and the private sector? Perhaps anyone?
This was more of a sector where it was dominated by the state players. Basically, governments were working towards building solutions, and most of the infrastructure that was built to track space activity were not meant to track space activity, but it was built during world wars for different reasons, and now we have repositioned that to kind of track objects in space, and those are built decades ago. There is a requirement to build better infrastructure for us to be able to, understand the space activity better. There requires an entire infrastructure layer for the economy to operate. That's where I see a joint remediation or a public-private partnership where the governments have to work with private companies to come up with better technologies to be able to, understand better about the situation in space, which we have seen already happening. The United States government has been one of the dominant players in this particular sector, where they are providing data not only to the companies in the US, but also to several other countries and other private companies. With the access to such data, it's to some extent it is helping these satellite operators or the space actors to get data about what happens in space. If there is a collision, they receive an email in form of CDMs. So this has been done predominantly by the government. But now I think even the US Department of Defense transferred some of the responsibilities to US Department of Commerce, which means they are also wanting private companies to work with the government in terms of enhancing the infrastructure that they already have and complement to what they're doing. So that will be very crucial to the development of this particular sector as well, because any industry, be it space or any other industry, it only can grow when sustainability and the industry goes hand in hand.
Thank you. Any other comment on this issue? Julie?
Sure. Governments were the first satellite operators, and they remain satellite operators and consumers of satellite services. Importantly, governments are also the source of national regulation and licensing for satellites, and they are the members for multilateral organizations like the International Telecommunication Union, where we register our satellites and our orbital positions and the frequency bands that we use, and we use that process to deconflict the use of the radio frequency spectrum on orbit. So governments play a really crucial role here in this overall discussion, and they also have tremendous convening power in motivating the industry to work together on best practices, for example. Thank you.
Please, Sabrina.
So I completely agree with all the views here. I think from two different sides of it. First side, they need to bring industry into decisions. Regulations, I hear a lot of it, and yes, I think they're really needed. But regulations are applicable at industry level. If you don't have industry input, the impact that you want to receive isn't going to be there. You need to bring in industry. You need to understand their viewpoints. You need to understand how it is actually going to be implemented in the right way to get what you want out of it. We see so much, I mean, from an ESG world, from whatever kind of world, that policymakers impose decisions. And actually, the way in which we do it then has to be very tick box. And that's not the impact you want. You want the impact to really be there. You want sustainability to actually mean something. So the first thing I say is the way we can work together is by really bringing this kind of collaboration that's not just advocacy-based, but actually input-based. Decisions are made as a whole. Of course, that brings its own complexities, but that's one side. The other side is we see solutions, we see new startups, we see things being done and people, organizations wanting to do things to solve the problem of space debris, to solve kind of sustainability issues. but they're not commercially viable yet for industry to take on. And so where we really see this kind of partnership is enabling that viability, enabling the feasibility from an investment standpoint, from a coalition standpoint. And so those two sides, I think, would really enable a sustainable space that incorporates multi-stakeholders and really aims to achieve a particular goal in the right and correct way for impact to genuinely be made.
Thank you so much. Any other comment? No. Perhaps another question which touches on politics a little bit more. Of course, you know, there are actors that are capable, that have the resources to make this happen, including some public actors, some private actors as well. But it's probably not the case for all the countries, all the space agencies on this planet. So do you think that the governance of space, and space debris in particular, is inclusive enough? Or is it accentuating some of the gaps that we've seen grow in the last few years? Please.
I mentioned the ITU earlier, and the International Telecommunication Union, like the Federal Communication Commission, which is the regulator in the United States, has received a real surge in satellite network filings in the non-geostationary orbit space over the last few years. And what I see from that is both developed and developing countries filing for ITU access. And in fact, last year, the most prolific filers of ITU are developing countries. So there is opportunity there to be had. There's no barrier to putting in filings. We all know that many projects are aspirational, but the foot in the door is to have an ITU filing to achieve that aspiration. So I think that's all good news. Thanks.
Thank you. Matthias, what is the view from Latin America on this?
Sure. In Latin America, the government perhaps, well, so just a bit of background here. The traditional space, of course, is government-led space, NASA, ESA. And of course, in Latin America, we didn't have that. But now with new space, with private industry taking the lead, we see companies like SpaceX and the others, like Amazon here. And of course, now that's the chance for Latin America to take a step into what space and to bring all those benefits to Earth. So of course, there are governments where we have that gap because governments were the first satellite operators. But now we're working with governments that don't know about satellites, don't know about frequency allocation. But you just have to work with them. And we're happy to work with the Ecuadorian government. We actually do in translating what space is to what they already do. So we talk to the Ministry of Communications, and it's things they already do for cellular networks, but we're just bringing in the space perspective. And we together, private industry and government, work together to generate a regulation that helps attract business and bring more benefits of space to our countries. And then, of course, for Latin America in particular, it's helpful to work together. So I'm happy to, here in Paris, it's based the International Astronautical Federation. I'm happy to lead the Latin American committee where we talk about these things. So we don't want to always go in parallel and everybody figuring out things on their own, but we share with each other. This is how it's working in my country. You should try to talk to the minister about this, or maybe frame it this way. And that's how we grow as a connected region. And in that case, through the federation, we also are inclusive. They are inclusive with us. We hosted a global conference on emerging countries in Quito earlier this year in Ecuador. And the whole space community, like CEOs of companies, a lot of heads of agencies were here. And these topics were actually discussed. We were discussing how regulations for radio awareness, for orbits are placed and are inclusive of emerging countries, be it Latin America, Southeast Asia, or Africa. Everybody is welcome on the conversation. And that's what I like about space, and I like about this forum also, that in space and within this forum, it seems like borders are gone. And I like to have that as a message for the audience, that maybe go to space, like project yourself to space so that you can project yourself back in a connected together Earth.
Thank you. Yes, I think when we were talking backstage, Anirudh, you were the one who mentioned this really nice expression that a number of countries, including one you mentioned in Asia, said we need to have space in space. I thought it was a very nice way to frame this. Please, if you have any comments.
So that brings to the topic of orbit carrying capacity, and we already have slots for the GEO orbits, but for LEO, it's more or less like it's led by the industry. It's driven by the industry at this point in time, and we have players, mega constellation operators launching more and more satellites. And there was, a person from one country asking me a question: how do we ensure we get space there? So that's actually very difficult, and like John mentioned about market access. Market access will be one of the crucial aspects to regulate anything, and we've seen that happening when the US announces any rules, right? So US being one of the dominant players in this particular sector, if we, as probably me as an Indian person from an Indian company, do not follow to that rule, I don't have access to the market there. So that brings us to a position where we'll have to, work towards the regulations formed by a particular geography, which leads to market access. So this will be the key to regulate anything, and governance in space is actually a difficult topic to talk about. I mean, we don't have boundaries like we have in the aviation sector in terms of airspaces, and we don't have defunct aircrafts on airspaces, but we have a lot of objects which are not under our control. So management is really difficult in space. I would say it's more or less coordination.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. And on the concept of carrying capacity, I think that it's really important conceptually. The idea is not to say there's a limit. Whoever gets in first fills it up, and there's no room for anyone else. We have to stop. To the contrary, the concept is, how can we fill space efficiently so there's room for others? And to give you an example, if you visualize a glass cylinder and accept that for this discussion as the limits to what you can do in space, if one country comes in and fills the cylinder with 6 apples, there may not be room for another country to come in and put in its own apples. But if the first country, instead of filling it up with a handful of very large objects, puts in more efficient objects, say grapes. So instead of 6 apples, they put in 100 grapes. That may leave a lot of additional headroom for others to get access to space. And that's how we're thinking of using this tool, as a way of ensuring there is room for access, growth, and innovation for the future, and that we don't find the door closed as soon as it opens.
Please, Julie.
Thanks. Carrying capacity is a novel concept. I'm most familiar with some papers written by MIT professors on the subject. And I will say that the calculation methodologies are still evolving. The inputs are extremely important to determining what you get as an output. Your assumptions about whether a satellite is able to navigate around debris, what your assumptions are about the debris itself, and so on. That equilibrium in space is evolving, and our understanding of it is. But I think there is one lesson that for me is emerging from reading about carrying capacity, and that is the importance of maintaining one's orbit accurately. and having a tight orbital tolerance. Thank you.
Thank you. We are coming to the time where we can have a little exchange, if you don't, if it's okay with all of you, with the public. So we'll take the first question, please. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Julien Cantegray from the French startup Spaceable, and again, thank you for this forum. I remember last year we were 10 or 11. There has been a white paper. We are more than 50, so it makes it really the right forum to advance actually the cause. My question is, and it's back to John's, your comment on the French Supreme Court market access decision and the tendency of lawyers to push for a cause to the Supreme Court decision, and that's going to apply to everybody. The problem is solved. I think it's a bit different in space. Would you think it's only a question of pushing for the right norm, or should we push for a mix? And the answer is in my question, of the right norm, the right knowledge, for instance, carrying capacity or space weather, we need more information on that, and the right technology. We're at a time where we have radar, laser, optics, infrared, blockchain, cryptography, fusion, deep learning. You mentioned the term viability. As a startup, there are many things that we can do if there is right norm. So do you think it's just the norm or a mix of norms, technology, and knowledge that we should take into consideration when fostering a norm?
Thank you.
The way I'm thinking about it, they're all interrelated. And the knowledge helps us figure out how we assess the right norms and the right technology that we bring to bear. In other words, if we can model the problem reasonably well, then we can take a look at what knobs we need to turn and what levers we need to pull to solve the problem. So there may be norms that we think would be effective, but when we test them through an empirical model, we may find that they don't really make a difference. And the same thing with technology. We may find that one technological solution may be helpful, but it may not be the most effective way to solve the problem. So I just think of the carrying capacity, the modeling, as a way to evaluate what tools we bring to bear, and ideally what tools we bring to bear first. The other thing I would indicate is that this carrying capacity concept is not something that is static and that never changes. It ideally would take into account changes in the environment and changes in technology, and we may find that there's some elasticity in it as we go forward. But we have to have some sense of where we stand and where we're going to try to manage things over the coming years.
I think all three are important, and there's one fourth aspect that we haven't talked about, and that's collaboration. It's so important that satellite operators know where satellites are, where they're going, and when they're planning to go there. So the cooperation within the community is absolutely essential to safe space. Thanks.
Any other comments? Another question, please.
Thank you very much, Jean-François Bureau. My question would go to everyone. You are supporters of the Net Zero Space initiative. How do you see the next steps? What should be done now? The momentum has been reached. The Net Zero Space is a very important initiative. We know that there are other démarches regarding sustainability and the global governance of space. But from your point of view, what should be done now? Thank you.
Thanks. Matthias, please.
Thank you. For me, I just want to commend the Net Zero Space for the work that we're doing for the the sustainability in orbit. I invite for the future, for next steps to all the members to also think about sustainability on Earth. So maybe we can all work together, we can collaborate to start measuring our carbon impact of our operations, of our launches, of our ground segment operations, try to look for alternatives that maybe are carbon neutral, work together to minimize the impact on Earth of our manufacturing, of our fuels. Always take into account that, because if we want to be sustainable in orbit, we cannot forget about Earth, because we're asking people on Earth to think positively about space, where we are forgetting about Earth, so we have to be in sync with all that. So just, I think that would be a great way forward, and happy to be in the Net Zero Space Pact for that.
So what I would say is the next steps is action. We hear a lot of talk, it's great, but actually let's do something. Let's explore those startups that are looking to find solutions. Let's actually have those conversations. Let's actually align it to business objectives to make sure it's part of those everyday conversations. And I'm gonna one-up you and say not just carbon, but GHG emissions, biodiversity, water usage. Like, let's really think about what we are actually doing to the environment, to societies, through our operations, through our value chain. So yeah, I think action. We as SCS, I'm really happy to say that we have committed to conducting LCA, so life cycle assessments, across all of our products and services by 2030, meaning we're gonna look at all of the different indicators from climate change, biodiversity loss, water usage, communities that have had to be displaced, and so on, and actually say, right, we're gonna make use of that data, and we're gonna change the way we operate. We're gonna look at how we change the designs of our satellites, how we change the designs of different pieces of our operations to make things better, but also to expand the good that we are doing. You know, everyone here does good, and we still need to acknowledge that and then expand on it. Again, SCS provides connectivity to remote areas. So how can we use that for healthcare access, for education, expand the reach of people that we're doing? And so we're in an implementation phase of our strategy right now, but action is the key word. We want to take action. I think everyone here wants to take action, and I think the big question is how, and we need to do it from a very strategic sense now. So, yeah.
Please.
I was struck yesterday in a conversation with one of the participants in the roundtables. It was a government official who essentially said, you know, the work you all have done is terrific. Thanks for investing in that, but I need you to take this to the next level. And I'd like you to look at what you did in Working Group 1 and turn it into some very concrete and practical actions. So please continue your work, but tell me crisply and concretely what rules you think are needed, and then come back to me with that. I think that's a reasonable challenge, and I think it's something we can achieve in the coming months.
Thanks. So, Anirudh, what's the next norm we need to work on?
So, I mean, I think an initiative like this is very important to push the agenda. I mean, we are speaking here more or less because it's not because governments want to do it or someone wants to implement the rule, but it's more or less because there is a requirement, there is a need, because of we've seen an unparalleled change in the space sector. It's a revolution, I would say. For such a revolution to become successful, there requires an infrastructure on which everybody can operate on, and an initiative like this will push the agenda to the respective nations or the government, spacefaring countries, to bring up policies to ensure that whatever we have discussed in the working group is implemented as policies. And like he said, crisp, clear points are very essential so that we can put this across to the government and then make that implement. So in India, I will just give you an example. In India, when we were working on space situational awareness, we were the only company who were working on SSA in 2018. At that point in time, in fact, the government had some plans to develop indigenous capabilities to the nation, because this is one such domain which is dual use. They want to use this for military purpose and also for the space agency purpose. At that point in time, it was difficult for us to convince that a policy for space situational awareness is essential. But today we are at a position where we've been able to make some policy recommendations on this is how it should be. So a forum like this will be very crucial for us to, kind of push that agenda.
Thank you. We're coming to the end of this discussion, but I think we have the beginning of a roadmap for the working groups of the Net Zero Space initiatives. And of course, they are open to more supporters joining the initiative. But this was really wonderful. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking all the panelists. And for us at the Paris Peace Forum, Net Zero Space Initiative is an example of a multi-actor coalition that works. And this is really what we're trying to do, to bring different types of actors into coalitions that share the same purposes. So thank you again, and good luck with your work.